Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be taking a look at 538's new forecasts in the 2024 presidential election between incumbent President Joe Biden, who will be facing off the former President Donald Trump in a rematch from 2020. But before we get started, make sure you guys are subscribed as we're approaching 3,000 and click the bell so you don't miss out on any of my content. Also, we have memberships, so if you are interested in that, you can find a link in the description section. Now back to the topic of today's video. So here you can find on 538's new forecast that President Joe Biden is slightly favored to win the election, even though it's pretty close. So basically, Donald Trump and Biden both have equal chances, but Biden is slightly ahead. And according to their 100 maps, out of that 100, 52 of them show Biden winning, and 47 show a Trump victory. So basically, Biden wins 52 out of the 100 times in 538's forecast, and Donald Trump wins 47 out of the 100 times. So basically, Biden's up by exactly 5 maps, which is what this basically is saying. There is less than a 1 in 100% chance of RFK winning the election. So as you can see here, these are a lot of the electoral map outcomes that they displayed for the screen. For example, in this one, Trump wins with 301 electoral votes, Joe Biden's 237, and then this one shows Biden winning with 319 to Trump's 219. So yes, these are very different outcomes. If you want to take a look at some recent polling, for example, June 7th through the 9th, out of Morning Consult, so pretty recently actually, Donald Trump is trailing Joe Biden by around a percentage point, but it has 1.8 in terms of star rating, and then a 3-star rating from the YouGov and CBS shows Donald Trump with the lead by 1%, so that actually cancels out, and then Donald Trump retakes the lead from Morning Consult in another poll by 1%. And then, Yahoo News has Donald Trump and Biden tied equally at 44 to 44%. And in the highest rated polling out of all of these is Emerson College shows Donald Trump up by 6%. So, these are really different results. It depends what you look at. They just keep going back and forth. But in the majority of these, you find that Trump has the advantage. And they also did presidential election simulations. And Biden is actually favored to win, because 522 simulations out of the 1,000 show that Biden wins. Meanwhile, 474, simulations shows that Donald Trump is the winner. And then 4 simulations that shows basically it's a tie or RFK wins. So based off the average alone, basically only, Biden is winning with 274 electoral votes, so he's barely winning, it's extremely close, to Donald Trump's 264. So yet again, they basically have equal chances, and theoretically, even though Biden's the incumbent, Donald Trump is kind of also the incumbent, because it's really rare, it's not typical when you see a former president go against an incumbent president, basically a rematch. This rarely ever happens, but it has, but it's extremely rare, hasn't happened in a long time. And this is based off of electoral votes. You take a look at the popular vote, in which Biden has roughly a 2% advantage in terms of the popular vote, which in my opinion, that is kind of accurate, and I think that's realistic. I think that can definitely happen. I definitely can see Biden winning the popular vote by 2%. I think it's very possible. So Trump has 45% to Joe Biden's 47%. Meanwhile, they also include RFK Jr., which he's cracking 7.7%. And as we get closer to the election, I expect Kennedy's numbers to drop, because people are going to realize when they actually head to the polls that an independent candidate is more than likely not going to win. We live in a 2-party election system. At the very bottom, Donald Trump has a 78% chance, nearly 80% out of 100, in flipping one state that he lost in 2020. That can be either Georgia, either Arizona, or Wisconsin. One of those. Even Nevada, maybe. In my opinion, the most likely to flip that he lost out of, all the swing states is probably Georgia at the likeliest scenario, because it was literally the closest. Biden only won it by like 0.2%, a margin of roughly 10,000 votes. So now we specifically move on to the map, in which who's favored to win each of these swing states. This is where I kind of disagree with, and we're going to be filling out these states electorally to see who's going to end up winning according to 538's new forecast. Basically, Republicans think that they can make gains in New York and make this a whole lot closer, and Donald Trump had a rally in the Bronx, as we all know, because back in the 2022 midterms, Lee Zeldin almost won. He came within 6%. And right now, Joe Biden is the heavy favorite to win this state. Out of the 100 simulations, he wins it 97 times, so basically 97% of the time. And then as for Arizona, in which Republicans are hoping they are able to flip because of the border crisis, a record number of illegal border crossings, and also despite this state actually shifting towards the left, Democrats have made significant gains in the 2022 midterms, especially on the governorship, in which out of all these simulations, you would find that Donald Trump is actually favored by 52 times to Joe Biden's 48 times. So Trump has a lead of 4% in the state of Arizona. So according to 538's latest updated new forecast, Trump is winning Arizona if the election was held today. And literally every single poll in the state of Arizona from 538, besides one that was from April a long time ago, shows Donald Trump crushing Biden, winning by more of a margin than he did in 2016 against Hillary Clinton, which is coming from Fox News, which actually underestimated Trump, believe it or not, back in 2020, has Trump winning it by 5%. Another one below that has Trump up by 4, and another one up by 4 from the YouGov, CBS News, and another one, which is a Democratic-funded poll, by the way, shows Trump up by 4. So that is actually left-leaning with a bias towards Biden. They still have Trump up by 4. So if you have a left-leaning pollster who shows up Trump up by 4, he might even win by more than that in the state of Arizona. But when you actually average out these polls, Donald Trump has a specific lead of 0.5% of the state of Arizona with its 11 electoral votes. So it's going to be close no matter what, but Donald Trump has the edge in this state at the end of the day. And then as for Nevada, in which Republicans also expect that they are going to flip because of recent trends and shifts going in favor of Republicans. Republicans have won in the 2022 midterms in the state in terms of the governorship. So actually Donald Trump has the 10% advantage in terms of outcomes, basically simulations. As you can see, Trump wins 55 out of the 100 times in terms of simulations to Joe Biden's 45 times. And so that basically goes to show you that Donald Trump is the clear favorite to win this state. And he was even up by 12 points in a poll, which is a highly rated pollster, by the way. One of the most highly rated pollsters showed him up by 12, which with an A+ rating. And the latest poll has Trump up by 5 in this state. He's up by 3. He's up by 6. And you name it. Not a single poll shows a Biden lead in this state. Not even one. And so Donald Trump is clearly, easily going to flip the state of Nevada in 2024, according to 538's latest forecast. If you average all the polls together, Donald Trump has a lead of exactly 1 percentage point in the state of Nevada with its 6 electoral votes, which is considered a tilt margin in my opinion. And now as for Georgia, in which in my opinion, it's one of the easier flips or most likely to flip out of the states that Biden won back in the 2020 election and this election besides the state of Nevada. When you average all the polls out, Donald Trump has more of a lead in Georgia than he does in Nevada by a little bit more, by 1.6%. So Trump is also the favorite to win this state. So 538's latest forecast shows Donald Trump winning 57 times out of the 100 simulations to Joe Biden's 43 times out of those 100 simulations that were done. And so with that being said, Donald Trump's going to win this state by a lean margin, in my opinion, by 4% in the 2024 presidential election. I think Biden's numbers should drop significantly lower than where it was in 2020 in terms of African-American voters. He won it by nearly 90%. I expect him to drop as low as 80%. If Trump's lucky enough, Biden only gets 75% among African-Americans. And recent polling has shown Trump up by 18% on average and nearly 20 points among that minority group. The real numbers on election day, that may seem low, but it's actually a winning number for any Republican in nowadays elections. Individual polls, according to Quinnipiac University, Trump's up by 6 in the state, which it has a left-leaning bias, and he's still up by 6, so he might win by even more than that. And a Democratic-funded poll shows Trump up by 1, so he's going to win by even more than that, closer to 4 to 5%. And the Cook Political Report has also Trump up by 4. Biden has 0 leads in the state of Georgia on 538, literally 0 to none. So with that being said, Trump is more than likely going to flip the state in 2024, considering that the margin of error was just extremely close by 0.2% for Biden back in 2020. And moving on to the state of North Carolina, in which Trump actually won the state twice, both in 2016 and in 2020. So he's actually looking to expand his margin of 1.5% to maybe even 3% or even more than that in this state. So when you factor in all these polls together, when you average them out, Trump has a lead of 2.5% in the state of North Carolina, which is going to be considered a lean margin. So he's winning this according to 538's latest forecasts. So out of the 100 simulations, Donald Trump wins 61 of them to Joe Biden's 39 in the state of North Carolina. And let's break down some of these individual polls, in which literally every single one of them shows Trump leading. Not a single poll, just like in Georgia, has Biden leading. And keep in mind, he was leading back in 2020 polling, which it ended up overestimating him, and Donald Trump won the state. So the latest poll has Trump up by 5. Another one before that has Trump up by 12. So that's disastrous numbers for Biden. By the way, he hit a new low in terms of approval. He's at a 37% approval rating for Joe Biden. That is just disastrous, and that's losing numbers, especially for an incumbent. And then as for Virginia, in which Republicans think they can make gains in the state and make it possibly even closer, maybe decided by 1 to 2%. But keep in mind that Biden did crack double digits back in 2020. He won it by 10 to 11% actually. And Biden's winning it by nearly 80 times out of the 100 simulations. So that's easily going to shoot down the Republicans' argument of Trump actually has a chance in the state. So Biden is the clear favorite in the state of Virginia, according to 538's latest, forecast, despite polling actually showing it a tie in this state. But we'll see what happens with the outcome on election day. And moving on to some of these Rust Belt states, starting off with Minnesota, in which out of the 100 simulations, Biden wins 72% of the times to Donald Trump's 28. So he also is the clear favorite in this state. And keep in mind that when Ronald Reagan won every single state, 49 out of the 50, that one state he didn't win happened to be Minnesota. And it goes to show you how this is a very Democratic favored state. It favors Democrats significantly. So Donald Trump is also going to lose Minnesota, according to 538's latest forecast. But let's take a look at some of these individual polls. The latest one shows Biden up by 4%. The one before that, he's up by 2%. And the one before that, Trump is actually up by 3%. But that is a Republican-funded poll. And also, this state actually underestimated Biden, believe it or not, surprisingly, by like 3 points back in the 2020 election. So honestly, I still do think Biden's going to win this by like a lean margin at the end of the day, but it's going to get closer regardless of the outcome. And then as for Wisconsin, in which this was the closest Rust Belt state, so Donald Trump can definitely flip this. It was decided by 20,000 votes back in the 2020 election, a margin of 0.6% for Biden. So this can definitely flip in favor of Donald Trump in this election cycle. Let's take a look at some of these polls. When you average all of them out, Biden has a lead of 1.5% in the state of Wisconsin with its 10 electoral votes. But one thing to keep in mind is that back in the 2020 election, the polls underestimated the former President Donald Trump by nearly 6 points. So if you actually apply that polling error, you would find that Donald Trump, if you do the math, he's up by 5%, which is going to be lean Republican. So out of the 100 simulations, Joe Biden wins 57 times. So he's going to win Wisconsin according to 538's latest forecast to Donald Trump's 43 simulations. And you break down some of these individual polls, Biden's up by 5% from a poll conducted on May 31st. And then the one before that, a Democratic-funded one from the Super PAC, shows it an even tie. So the fact that you have a Democratic-funded one, despite, Wisconsin polls underestimating Donald Trump by nearly 6 points in the 2020 election, shows it a tie. That goes to show you that Donald Trump probably, realistically, has a lead in this state if we're talking about reality. And the one before that from Bloomberg, another Democratic-favored one, shows Trump up by 1 in this state. And then it honestly just goes back and forth. Trump even has a lead by 10 points, which I don't know if you want to trust that or not. But if you average all of them out, you would find that Joe Biden has a slight lead in this state. But keep in mind that Trump was underestimated by nearly 6 points. So if you apply that polling error, Trump realistically wins by 5%. But obviously, elections are not decided by actual polling errors. But we'll see what happens on election day. And then as for Michigan, when you average all the Michigan polls out, you would find that Joe Biden actually is leaning by nearly 2% at the end of the day with the state's 15 electoral votes. So out of the 100 simulations, Joe Biden wins 58 of them to Donald Trump's 42. And you take a look at some of these individual polls. The latest one actually has Trump up by 1%. From June 3rd, very recently of this month. And the one before that, Biden's up by 1. So it actually cancels out. And then it goes back and forth. Trump's up by 1 again. And then Biden's up by 2. Trump's up by 3. Biden's up by 2. Biden's up by 1. Trump's up by 6. Trump's up by 1. And then Biden is up by 2. So it keeps going back and forth in this state. And at the end of the day, Biden's going to win Michigan in 2024 according to 538's latest model. And then as for Pennsylvania, Biden's home state, so he might have some name recognition and he really can connect to these voters. So he probably has a good, decent shot at winning this Rust Belt state, probably more than any other. When you put together and average out all the Pennsylvania polls, it shows that Biden is winning the state by 1.6%. And keep in mind, he won this state by literally 1.2% back in the 2020 election. So he's going to win every single Rust Belt state, the most important 3 ones, according to 538's latest model. So he's already at 266 electoral votes, but obviously we still have New Hampshire to fill out. But let's break down some of these polls individually in the state of Pennsylvania. Out of the 100 simulation, Biden wins 57 times to Donald Trump's 43. So slightly closer than Michigan, but he still wins. And the latest poll in 538 has Biden up by 1 in the state. The one before that, he's up by 3. And then a lot of really interesting ones come in. Trump has 3% lead in 3 polls in a row, back to back. So it's very consistent. And then he actually expands his lead by 5%, 4%, 1%, and then it's a tie at the very bottom. So the 2 polls at the very top that show Biden winning are, they're the latest ones, obviously, but the ones all before that, those are the only 2 polls that show Biden winning. And one of them is actually a Democratic super PAC, funded poll. So if you disregard that, Trump is actually leading a majority of them. The last state from this model is going to be New Hampshire, in which Joe Biden has a 75% chance of winning this state. The latest poll has him up by 3. The one before that, it's a tie at 37 to 37%. And the one before that has him at 6%. So this state is actually looking pretty good, solid for the incumbent president, Joe Biden. So according to 538's latest model forecast, Biden wins the re-election with 270 electoral votes, extremely close, making it one of the more closer elections in modern U.S. history. Trump's 268, falling short once again by literally 2 electoral votes. So let me know if you agree with 538's model and what states you agree with or disagree with in the comment section down below. Agree with this map from 538 or not, and why? One thing I found interesting about 538's model, for the path of 270, Biden's actually doing pretty better than he is anywhere else. For example, in Wisconsin, he has a lead of 1%, and Pennsylvania, it's even more by 2%, and then Michigan, he's up by a couple points as well. And even in the state of Virginia, he's up by literally 7 points. Despite literally the most recent poll shows it a dead tie. And then as for Arizona, Donald Trump has a lead of 1%. He's up by 1% as well in Nevada, as well as Georgia, he's up by 2%. In North Carolina, he has a lead of 3 percentage points. So it really depends on what you actually look at specifically. I mean, one thing that one model you take a look at does not speak for the entirety of any other model. It really depends on what data they're using and what you're looking at. Here are really interesting probabilities, scenarios playing out. For example, Biden wins the Electoral College by more than 350 electoral votes. That is at a 23% chance, extremely unlikely. And Trump has an 11% chance, so even less, of getting 350 electoral votes. So it's pretty funny that Biden actually has a more of a chance, higher chance, of actually surpassing 350 electoral votes than Donald Trump does, even though Trump is literally leading in majority of polls. Here's the interesting part. Trump has a greater shot of winning the election with less than 350 electoral votes by 36% to Joe Biden's 29%. You look at the 100 simulations that were conducted. And then here's another interesting scenario. Biden wins the national popular vote, which I think is very possible. He has a 63% chance of doing so, so nearly 2/3 to Donald Trump's 37%. I think that's a little bit fair, but slightly underestimating Donald Trump. And Republicans in the 2022 midterms actually won the popular vote, but still lost the Senate. And then Biden actually has a 51% chance of winning at least one state that he lost in 2020, which in my opinion is kind of overestimating him. For example, he's going to have to win either North Carolina, which was the closest state that he lost, or Texas, which is just not going to happen, plain and simple. It's pretty clear at this point in time. This is actually pretty interesting. There's a 62% chance that the election is decided by a smaller margin than the vote share for all the third-party candidates totally included, which in my opinion, I think that actually is going to happen. Pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. One last final reminder before I end this is to subscribe as we're approaching 3,000 and click the bell so you don't miss out on any of my content. Also, we have memberships, so you can find a link to that in the description section. Thank you everyone for watching.